Today we're going to be talking about zero-based budgeting, what it is, and how you can use it to reach your financial goals. Coming up next. Hi everybody, my name is Dee Burks and this is Retirement Rescue, where we talk about how to make money, save money, and create a retirement from nothing. Well, if you've been listening to my channel, you know I'm not a huge fan of budgeting, not because it doesn't work, but because people misunderstand how to effectively use a budget. I am a big fan of something called zero-based budgeting, and let me give you a definition of what that is. Zero-based budgeting is when you take every single expense you have. You start with zero and you justify every expense you have. You don't do like you do with a traditional budget and just slot it into what you're already doing. And not everyone uses that definition of zero-based budgeting. In fact, for those people who follow Dave Ramsey, his idea of zero-based budgeting means you're taking your current expenses and you're subtracting them from your current income and ending up with zero. To me, that's not zero-based budgeting. You know, when we think about the process of budgeting, people really focus on slotting that money into certain positions. Maybe you've used a budget you found online, maybe you created one on your own spreadsheet, and like any budget, it has the typical categories. This is your utilities and your home and your car. And the thing is, most of us will slot in the money we're already spending and then try to figure out how to shave little bits and pieces. But basically, all we're doing is moving money around. We're not really freeing any money up to meet our financial goals. Now, one of the easiest ways to think about this in your mind is to think about, okay, the money you're spending this month is in prison. It's in a little prison that you've created. And the money goes all these different places, into all these little different cells. And a lot of times when you use a traditional budget, all you're doing is putting money into different cells. You're not springing any money out of that prison, freeing up that money to meet your financial goals. Well, one of the cool things about zero-based budgeting is that you start with zero. You justify every single thing. And what you need to start with are the big things. Because people will take a regular budget and say, oh, well, that's my mortgage, so there's nothing I can do about that. And that's my car expense, there's nothing I can do about that. No. With a zero-based budgeting, you really think about that. And one of the things that I tell people to start with is to ask yourself, if I couldn't live in this home anymore, or this apartment, or wherever you're living, and I had to go out and find a place to live, would I choose something very similar to what I'm in for this same price? Let's do an example. Maybe your mortgage is $3,000. which is a low mortgage in a lot of places and a relatively normal mortgage in other places. But let's just say, for ease of math, that it's $3,000. And it's a home you've lived in for, let's say, 15 years, and you have a 30-year mortgage. In those 15 years, you've mostly paid interest. You have very little paid down on that mortgage. But you're still paying that $3,000 a month. Now, you go out in the area you live, or the area you want to live in, and you think, okay, could I get an apartment for $1,000? Would that suit me? And then you ask yourself, if I had to choose a new home all over, would I choose something very similar, and would I pay that amount for it? What happens to a lot of people is they realize, well, no, they look for something less expensive that could meet their needs right now. Not their needs 15 years ago when maybe they purchased that home. Their needs right now. Now is a good time for people to be selling their homes because the market's at a high. And it's true that you always have to pay to live somewhere. But that doesn't mean you have to pay as much as you're paying. But human beings tend to have what we call a sunk cost bias. That means the more money we put into something, the more valuable it becomes, even if it's not really that valuable anymore. We have the same problem with collectibles or things we have bought over time. We look at them as valuable, but if you were to go and buy them on the secondhand market, the used market, which is what they would be now, they're worth nothing. And so we have to release ourselves, free ourselves from that sunk cost bias and see, is there a better way to reach our financial goals? Those big expenses are the first thing and the best way to free up money to reach your financial goals. I did the same thing. I got rid of the mortgage and I got out of that house basically breaking even, which was really all I wanted. I just wanted not to lose money. So I got out of that mortgage. I paid cash for a manufactured home. A lot of people wouldn't live in a manufactured home, and I don't see it as a long-term sort of situation. But I can live in this house for next to nothing. And I view that as temporary. Now, there are financial people that will say that's a bad idea. Oh, you should pay that mortgage. You should. But the way I looked at it was, okay, do I want to spend half of that mortgage paying interest? Because when you look at your mortgage paperwork and you see how much interest you're actually paying, you're paying double for that home, for what it's actually worth, sometimes more than double depending on your interest rate. But over time, you're paying a lot of interest. That's just money you're giving to someone else. And for what? It's not going to make that home more valuable in the future. It is sunk cost. I am a big fan of cutting your losses, getting to where you can start meeting your financial goals, and then at that point, once you have your debt paid, once you've been able to save money, you've started saving for retirement, you've got your situation secure, at that point, you can look to pay cash for a home that you're going to live in the remainder of your life that suits you. If you want a home, you may decide that renting's the best for you, especially if you're over 65. Renting may be the option for you. But in applying zero-based budgeting, you start with those big items. Can you get a less expensive vehicle that gets you from one place to another? Some people have a bias towards buying new vehicles all the time. For some reason, at some point in their life, they've become convinced that older vehicles are unreliable, which is absolutely not true. And they tend to hold their value better. New vehicles tend to lose 50% or more sometimes of their value in just the first 5 years. And the idea that an older vehicle takes more maintenance isn't true. I have a vehicle that's almost 15 years old. I just do regular maintenance on it. I just recently replaced the brakes on it. And that's really the only thing I've done to it in the last 5 years, other than regular maintenance. So a lot of times we have these ideas which are absolutely not based in fact. They're based in someone else's opinion that maybe we heard when we were younger and we're convinced, oh, we have to do it a certain way. Or it's something we've convinced ourselves that isn't true. And the biggest point with zero-based budgeting is you keep no darlings. And I mean none. That means everything is on the table. You know, in regular budgeting, we tend not to put everything on the table. Those things that are habitual, maybe it's what we spend every month on groceries, maybe it's what we spend on our car or our home, maybe it's having cable or whatever it is that we habitually do, we start to think of those expenses as non-negotiables. But zero-based budgeting requires you put all those little darlings on the table. You look at every single one and you try to do it as objectively as possible. And that's the part that's hard. Do it objectively. Say, if I was buying this today, if I was purchasing this today, if I was signing up for this service today, would it be as valuable? Let's take the idea of cable television. How much do you actually watch? How many new streaming services are out there that might be better for the amount of time you spend actually using the service? The same is true with cell phones. Reevaluate your plan. Reevaluate your phone. Decide, do you need to upgrade that phone to a new one every couple of years? Or can you keep it longer than that? We all have to make these decisions, but zero-based budgeting forces you to justify to yourself based on today's environment, not when you bought it, today's environment, if it's still worth what you're paying. A lot of times, in fact, most of the time, the answer is no, it's not. That allows you the mental clarity to then do something about it. When you're doing traditional budgeting and you get into your mind that some of these fixed costs are just costs you have to pay, then you never really address when it comes time to let those go. And you end up paying and paying and paying. Now, zero-based budgeting also requires that you look at these expenses every month or every quarter, whatever your given time frame is, and at least quarterly, I would say, because you will have seasonal expenses that come up that aren't your normal expenses. And so you want to evaluate those and plan for those every time you do a zero-based budget. And the object of the game here is not to spend everything you earn. The object of the game with zero-based budgeting is to free up money that will buy your financial freedom. That's the whole idea. It is not just to reorganize the money you're currently spending, although that's part of it. But that's not enough. You have got to figure out how to free up more money to apply to those financial goals for your future. We tend to think that things are forever. When we make a decision, that's it. And if we made a decision 15 years ago, we have to stick to it. No, we don't. Nothing is forever. So don't think of changes as permanent. If you sell your home and you go to an apartment and you don't like living in that apartment, guess what? You can change your mind. It's not forever. If you get rid of your expensive vehicle and buy a less expensive one and you don't like it, guess what? You can go get a different one. Nothing is forever. And for some reason, when we are making these big decisions, we feel locked in, like it's, this is forever. Because the size of the loan you get a lot of times says you're locked in for 30 years or for 10 years or for whatever it is. But we're not. We can sell that asset. We can get ourselves in a different situation. We can rent. We can live with someone else for a while. If it doesn't work out, we can get our own place. Nothing is forever. And so getting ourselves out of that mindset is the hardest part. Once you free this money from the little financial prison you've created and you're able to start putting that money toward your future goals, maintaining that commitment is vital. There comes a time when you have to look at the reality of the situation and realize if things are going to change, you have to change them. And then take responsibility to do that. I would challenge everyone watching this video, go through your budget, go through all your expenses, and really evaluate what can you do without, and then use that money to reach your financial goals. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please click subscribe, and I'll see you next time.